Hey, this is going to be a quick video for OSINT Where Am I? As you can see on the screen, it's already been solved by one of our team members, but we're going to go ahead and just do a quick solve. It is ranked medium for some reason, and I agree with our team members that it's easier than medium for short. Hopefully you don't mind my cat on the stream. He requires lots of love at all times, so he'll probably be in and out of the stream every so often. Because he is just like that. I'm trying to train him to be a cyber guy as well. So, all right, let's have him come off. And no, you're not drinking that. All right, let him do his thing real quick. So let's kind of take a look at this. So we have something where it says your friend thought using a JPEG was a great way to remember to log into the private server. Can you find the flag? So the first thing first you could do is download the JPEG itself and kind of take a look at it, right? And as you can see, I've already been looking at it in the background. So some interesting things here is that you could go down a rabbit hole and try to figure out what this is. My first guess was like this was in Chicago. It's not. If you use something like Google Lens, for example, you can kind of highlight the tower itself and it will give you the Bank of America Plaza Tower. So we could go down there. Sometimes flags do show up in reviews. Like sometimes they will go into here and make a quick review of it. But however, if we look at the newest is a month ago. I doubt that they put the flag in there that long ago. Just in case, we can also do a flag search, and it won't find anything. So there's no flag in here, right? And then you can probably go down more rabbit holes, and like you can look at it, and say, hey, it looks like this picture was taken towards the west, or facing the west, I should say, because it's at sunset. Or it could be morning, but more likely it's sunset, and kind of like try to figure out where this person is. I go back, so I'm going to close this out. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to close that out because that's not related. And we're going to see what he said on the challenge. So we downloaded the file first without reading it. That's my mistake, right? So your friend thought using a JPEG was a great way to remember how to log into the private server. Can you find the flag? Immediately, this should be Stego. It says OSINT, but I think that's a trick. Because it's telling you that your friend's using a JPEG to remember logging credentials. So he's hiding credentials inside this JPEG file. So let's go back here real quick, right? Let's take a look at this. I'm going to go to properties, right? And I'm going to immediately see in the details that there's this weird string on here. What? So and it ends with an equal sign. That's immediately knows that it's base 64, right? So I've already copied it over to this one using magic, and immediately have the flag. Now the last part of it is not 100% correct. It's missing this part, but that's neither here nor there. But obviously, easy, very easy challenge. Should not be marked medium. So we're going to go over a few more here. Let's take a look at PHP Stager, right? So we found PHP set up as an auto run to stage some other weird shady stuff. Can you unravel the payload? Note, this challenge is based off real-world malware, and they did their best to defang the code. So I already have it up here, all right? So we're gonna go and open up, yes, phonetic. There should have been an original one. This is not the original one. That's fine. So we're going to close that out, and we're just going to re-download it. Right. Ignore all the stuff that you see on my screen. I'm very messy sometimes. So we'll re-download it, right? We have it here. We're going to upload it in Notepad++. Wherever it went. There it is. Okay. So we're going to edit this, right? All right, let's take a look at this. Immediately tells us it's a PHP file. So for security purposes, let's not rename it as a .php, just in case, right? We're gonna kind of expand this a little bit. And there's a lot going on here? There's a lot going on, right? Uh, First thing you should notice is that besides the big string that's right here, um, this function name is weird. This variable name is weird. This variable name is weird. So somebody's obfuscating the code, right? Big problem, very big problem. We need to kind of correct that to kind of figure out what this is doing. So we have a function up here. There's a for loop here. There's another for loop here. That's comparing variables to string lengths, and it's returning another variable. Let's take a look at this variable real quick, and we see that it's declared right up here. So it's right here, but it's also appended. So in PHP, and probably other programming languages as well, dot equals means append, right? So what this is stating right here, real quick, just this part right here, this variable, which is currently empty, because we can see it's only declared 3 times right now. So once as an empty string, and then the second time it's appended. So it's basically stating, hey, you're going to open up and you're going to add whatever this value is to the end of this, right? That's what that means, just real quick. And then it's returning whatever that is. And we can see that this is being called as an array. It's really weird. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, right? We see another variable declared with just this string, right? It's a random amount of string. Could be code, could be an encryption key. So we're going to pay attention to this later. And then we have another variable declared, right? And it's this big, long, and for some reason my string, here it is. Okay, my lines are not working. Let me fix that real quick. We'll see down here real quick. The selection, if you pay attention to the selection, we're going to scroll all the way back up here. All right. The selection shows like 120,000 characters. It's a big string, right? I'm going to get rid of this. So immediately, this can be daunting for people. They look at like, whoa, there's so much just crap going on, right? Well, we're going to cut it out, right? And I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to go ahead and paste it in here. This is where the string is going to sit for now, right? You don't need it right now. It's just a string. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post, because it's PHP, so I'm going to post a comment in here for myself. So let's say it's that string is elsewhere. We know where it is. It's just there just in case we forget about it. And as you can see, it shortens the file to 26 lines. There's some weird comments here. Don't make any sense. Probably obfuscated as well. But it's pretty simplistic. The key thing that I see that it's missing is the end enclosure here that should be down on the bottom. It should be a question mark and then a greater than caret. We're not going to close it out. It's probably defanged like that on purpose. So we're just going to go ahead and ignore that for now. So let's take a look at these two empty strings right here. Right, so they're just declared empty. If I highlight this, because Notepad++ allows you to do that when it looks at code, as long as it recognizes it as code, I should say. We see that it's declared, appended here, and then called upon here twice. So it's very interesting, right? Let's look at the second one. It's declared, called upon, so appended, I should say, and then called upon here. So basically, like I'm going to draw my attention to this real quick. Basically, it's saying this variable, k, is now this variable with all this information inside of it, right? So this variable is declared as something. So these sets of strings, these character strings, are all being fed into this variable and assigned to that variable. So that's something to pay attention to. And then we also have C right here. Now, with PHP, with programming, it does help to kind of have a base understanding of how programming works, right? There's something called main, or at least there should be like a main function that's called upon when a program is ran. PHP is not really program oriented on its own. It's utilized the background with web content, um, but you could still declare a main. You could still have that. That doesn't exist anywhere here. The only thing we have is a function, and then we have two for each loops, and then we have this declaration, right? This should be kind of like right off the bat be pointed out of. So you should kind of pay attention to that. This is this is calling C is what it's doing on the next line. So technically this is our main right here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this real quick just to see where it's called upon. And I only see it once. I don't see it anywhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, do a find, and we're going to replace it with main. Now, this may or may not be syntactically correct. There might be people pulling their hair out. I don't care. It helps for me to understand what this thing is doing, because we got to deobfuscate what this program is doing in order to find the flag. So we're going to go ahead and replace all. So now we have main declared here. Makes sense to me. All right. We'll close this. Well, actually, we'll just put this to the side, right? All right. And we're going to keep doing this until we can understand overall what this program is doing. So we see these for each loops, right? Let's pay attention to these real quick. These for each loops, they're declaring to do something until it's done. That's what the for each loop is for. So it's saying for each instance here as K. So it's declaring K in here. Now, K in here is different from K out here. This is an internal variable to the function. So it's not being utilized anywhere else. So we don't really have to worry about the fact that it's the same name as this one. This one is a global variable, so we don't have to worry about that for now. All right. So for each as K, right? So it's now saying there's an index, there's an array of people here, or variables here, right? So we have 4, 24, 4, 16, 31, 29, 32, so on and so forth, right? So these could be numbers on their own, but what they really are references to an array or an index. So these are identifiers into something it's calling upon as K. So it's saying for each one of these, it's going to assign it as K, and then it looks like in here that it's assigning it into an appendix, or it's appending to this variable. So it's a very weird, convoluted way of calling a function. It's obviously trying to obfuscate what it's doing. So we have two blank ones here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these. So I'm going to copy this out, paste this in here, and I'm going to name this empty1. Now I did capitalize empty. I'm just trying to keep it separate just in case if something else comes up. So we're going to call it empty1, and we're going to replace all. All right. So that clears up this variable. Before we analyze what we have, I'm going to do it the second one as well. We're going to call it empty2. Okay, and then we're going to replace all. All right. Excuse me, I'm wiping my nose on camera. I have the sniffles. There's allergies going on right now. So, all right. So let's take a look at what we've done so far, because we're going to take this slow. And I'm going to wrap this up real quick because you guys are going to kind of catch on real quick what's going on here. So we have empty1, right? It's empty, and then it's filled in with a bunch of stuff from this variable with this array, and then it's called upon again here. So main is saying that it's going to equal whatever this is with this string, this function, this string. So it's receiving 3 inputs, right? So we see here, it's calling the first function. So I'm going to rename this func1 because there's only one function anyway. So I'm going to replace it with func1. Replace all. Okay. And then we see it's calling this one right here. And as you see previously that I told you, like when you get something this big, that's 120,000 characters, and you just push it aside for now because it's not going to go anywhere. It's not really necessary for the function of the script here. we see that it's the big string. It's the really big string, right? So it's calling that string into empty1. So it's feeding it into empty1. So whatever empty1 is at this point, because it's doing something here on this line here, and then it's applying it to the big string. Very interesting. So moving us a little faster here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this by the index. So basically wherever a squirrely bracket is. So I'm going to do that, enter, keep going, keep going. There's another one here, that one. So there's a for loop right there. Let's see here, keep going, x1. All right, and then it closes out here. All right, now normally most people they want to see a tab out, so we'll just quickly do that real quick. So we have 3 levels going on here. All right. Now, if you know anything a little bit about programming, something that should stick out to you like a sore thumb is this right here. In object-oriented programming, most of them at least, plus plus just means it adds a number up. So if that variable, like this ox-wool, right, is a 0, and that plus plus is right next to it, all it is telling it is go up 1. So in programming languages, you can do functionality. I don't want to go too deep into like how object-oriented programming works because I'm not even an expert at it either. Is that it's a way of kind of going through a loop of processes that you want it to do automatically without having to worry about a counter. The counter is part of the function. So I think these are temporary, and like I stated before, if it's called within a function, they're considered like internal. They're not global variables. They're localized. So they're not going to be called outside of this function, right? So we don't have to worry about what this is because it's only being called upon internally. So the first one, because actually let's do this one. This is the first for loop, right? If I'm using kind of a variable index to count up or down depending on what I'm doing, normal procedures always use I. I is the I forgot exactly what it stands for, but it's the like the indicator. And it's just by historical context. Everybody has always started with I as a counter, and then they use J, and then K, and then so forth, right? So we're going to go ahead and rename that to just I. Oops, I. Replace all, okay? And then the next second loop, same concept, because it looks like there's a for loop within a for loop. So we're going to use the next variable down, which is going to be J. Okay. Replace all. All right. So now we see that it's utilizing something, and it's calling upon itself with a string length from other variables. Okay. This function has 2 inputs here. It has 1 and 2. So it's utilizing something here, and it's utilizing something here. Let's go back, because this function is declared that it needs 2 variables. It has to have, or 2 inputs. It has to have it. Otherwise, the function doesn't work. Now, technically, it can use 1 because this one is called upon, and we'll get into that a little later. But by default, it's supposed to have 2 inputs. But if we look down here, technically, there's only 1 input. Right? Technically, this can be the secondary input, which it is. But if this wasn't here, it could just declare it as empty. But it's declaring a string, right? An empty string. This is a string. So it makes sense that this is going to go into here. This is technically, I think, a key. So the first thing I'm going to do is just move this into a key. Just recall it a key. I might be wrong. I know I'm not because I solved this, but that's my first indication is that that's key. So rename that. Bam. So we have a key as an empty string. Let's see where else it's called upon, right? So we see this is called a bitwise operation. So it's doing something here with this variable with J. Okay. So I think this is a XOR, but it's a bitwise operation. So it's doing something inside this double for loop. So let's take a look at this. This input can be called anything. So I'm just going to call it input is what I'm going to call it. That do that. Bam. So now we have input and key coming in, right? So we look at this. It's now declaring, and I'm going to start separating it by semicolon because that's usually the end of the line, so to speak, in a function. So take a look at this real quick. Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Put that down here. Yeah, that's all fine. All right. So first thing we'll look at is that we have two unknown variables. This one is stating that this variable is now input variable. Why is that doing it? Because technically you don't need to do that in a function. The only reason why it's doing this is that because it's obfuscating what it's doing. If we highlight input, there's only two parts where it's in. It's fed into it, and then that whatever that variable is now at, it's just assigning it to another variable. So this sounds like it's just wasted input. It's just an additional variable to either waste bandwidth, time, whatever, right? So I'm going to call this new input. So we'll do this because that's what it is. It's the same thing as input. It's just a new variable. Okay, so new input, replace all, bam. So now we're going to get a little bit more feel about this. So new input is now whatever what this is now, what's being fed to, and new input is used as a string length here in this for loop and here in this for loop, and it's just these two. Okay, so there's doing comparisons. So there's some weird stuff going on here. So let's keep doing this real quick. We have an empty string here, but we also see this is the variable returned. So I'm going to call this output. Do that and do that. Okay, replace all. Right. So now this looks a lot cleaner, right? So now we kind of know what's going on here. So it's a bitwise operation. It's XORing each other. So basically, in a nutshell, as simple as I can explain to it, what this is doing is taking this input and it's XORing it with this input, which technically is not really a key at this point, but it technically is, because if this key is hard-coded, so this tells me that this is related to this string somehow. Without this won't be able to interpret whatever payload it's trying to do. Now you might ask, okay, so what are these things for, right? Well, I'm just going to rename this to long string because I don't have an imagination, right? So long string, replace all, and I'm going to name this short string because I don't know what this is, but I can see it's a string similarly to the big string, but it has additional characters in it. So I'm like, okay, so it's just probably just a short string. So we'll call it that, short string. Replace all. Okay. Now, besides the sorry, I lost my train of thought. Besides the strings, because the strings don't matter, they're in quotation marks. We don't have to rename those things for now. All the variables and all the functions are named correctly. So now we have a simplified version of what this is doing for the most part, right? So we see here is a declared function, right? It's taking in two inputs. One is declared as an empty string, right? And they're XORing it and returning an output, right? So now we go down here. We have two empty strings here. We have a short string here. We have a long string here. Okay. Now notice something here is when I renamed this, it also renamed these two right here. This is curious to me. So it took me a while to remember this, but a string is also an array in PHP. So technically you can, if you're like, let's say you're calling this, right? You can say, hey, like, I don't know, print f short string. And that will print on the screen this entire string. You could also do something like this. I think it's dots, and then like the index, and we'll print out the 12th character, just the 12th character. You could also do like 11 through 12 or comma 12 or whatever the syntax is. Doesn't really matter if you know what the syntax is, because I don't know what the syntax is. What matters is if you look at, going back down here, if you look at this, remember this array, right? As k, right? So it's declaring this variable. This is what this means. It's declaring this variable as these index locations from this variable. That's all it's doing. It's basically, it could be confusing if you don't know programming, which I understand, but just look at it this way. Like it's saying, hey, remember these numbers? And these numbers represent this variable. You're going to grab those variables specifically from this string. That's it. And you're going to assign it to this empty one. That's all this is doing, right? So basically, it's taking these index locations and making it into this variable. So if we do this correctly, and remember, arrays start with 0, right? So if this is index 24, it's actually the 25th character on here. So just be careful how you count that out, right? So if we look at the 25th character here, so let me do this real quick because I'm lazy and I don't like counting. So if you look on here on my screen, we can see the column positioning, right? So here's column positioning 25, which is technically 24 in an array. Bear with me, right? What's in front of it, or what it is in front of it, is B, right? So what we could do is I can open up a brand new notepad here, all right? And we can see that B is there, so it's B, right? So the first letter of this empty string, or empty one now, is B, right? So now we go to 4, right? So let's go back here. Okay, so we're going to go to column position 5, right? It's in front of A, right? Right? So we see BA, right? Let's do the third one. 26. Where's 26 at, right? 26 is technically positioning column 27, which is S, right? So we're going to do this, right? And let's do the fourth one. 31. So let's take a look at 31. Okay. Sorry, 32. So it's in front of E. Now we're not going to do this for all the positionings because you should probably guess what this is, right? Base, right? I can already tell you what it is. It's base 64 decode. That's what that is. So all this is telling it is that this variable is now base 64. And here's the cool part, is that you could technically now erase this. Okay, I'm going to search for this real quick. It's a function in PHP. That's all this is. What they try to do is they try to extenuate the program itself to confuse anybody or anything at the present time of what it's doing. We didn't need that string. It was useless. So you probably guess, okay, so if that's true for the first for each, what about the second for each? You are correct. Same concept. It's a waste of time, right? So let's figure out what it's doing. All right. So let's do this real quick. So same thing. We look at the location of the index that's looking for. So we look at 26 first, and I'll only do the first one, and I'll finish the rest. So 26. Let's see where it is S, right? So we have S, and the next one's going to be T, and then you have two 14s, which are R, and then you have 31, which is E again, and then 33, which is V. Okay. Now this may not seem like much, but if you are familiar with programming a little bit, it's nice to be very familiar with it. strref is string reverse, right? So all this is telling it to do is that it's assigning this as strref, string reverse. And we can see it's in front of this right here, right? We see all this information here. There's a bunch of weird stuff on here. Now, also in PHP, what it does is it ignores all the dots in between string characters and just combines them into one. And we can do that right now. So like I can do, let's do this. We're going to copy, and we're going to find and replace, because we're going to try to do this as quickly as possible. Replace all. Okay. So now we're left with this weird string right here, right? This Noit Knuf ETA ERC. Well, we just revealed that the second for each loop is really this. And as you can see, it's a function. and string reverse. Okay, so all it's doing is it's reversing the string. So again, useless, just noise to the wind, so to speak, right? Let's remove this. So it's just reversing the string. Okay, well, cool. Well, we can do that ourselves with something like this, right? So let's get rid of the old flag that we were working on, and we can do reverse. All right, reverse by character. What? Create function? Again, useless. All this is telling us is that it's assigning k as create function. So again, we remove all this, right? And we remove this, and we do this, okay? Now, create function is deprecated in PHP, the latest version of PHP 8. Like, it just doesn't exist anymore. So at this point in time, trying to research what create function exactly doesn't really matter. What really matters, because if you see this, we have these 3 inputs, but we also have these stars, right? This got my attention, but at the same time, it's also just information that's useless because this string doesn't go anywhere, right? It's creating a function with a string, and then it's doing a base 64 decode of a function that also does a base 64 decode of the long string, okay? So there's a lot of noise here. So we now know that in the most simplistic terms possible, it's assigning, utilizing function 1 with a key and an input, right? And the input is that long string, which is base 64 decoded, right? So let's do that real quick, right? I'm going to copy this, and we're not going to do royalty-free music. Ignore that. All right, let's get rid of this. And we're going to do base 64 decode. All right, so now it's decoded to a certain extent. Now you might be thinking, oh wait, it's not human readable, obviously. The problem is that you can see is that it's fed into a function. So with CyberChef, you could technically do this without CyberChef. It's just a hell of a lot easier if you don't know what you're doing to a certain extent with programming. We're going backwards, right? So we're following what this embedded call function is doing. The first thing it does is it decodes, base 64 decodes this long string, which we just did, right? Then it's fed into the function with this as a secondary variable known as the key now. So we need to figure out how to do this, right? Well, I said previously, this is a bitwise operation, right? And we now know between the 2 for loops with one embedded that it's XORing the input with the key, right? So how do we do that outside of program? Well, luckily, CyberChef does have that ability. We just got to find it. So it's XOR. So let's add that to the bottom because that's the next layer down, right? And you can see that's asking for a key in hex. Now, you could change it over, and we'll play around with this. Always just, if you don't really know, just guess. It's not going to hurt it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy over the key into here and see what happens. Nothing happens. Let's switch it over to base 64. This looks a little bit cleaner, right? I'm going to go with the base 64 just in case. I might be wrong, but hex doesn't use like T, V, and E, so I'm going to keep it at base 64 for now. All right. So the next thing after it XORs itself is that it base 64 decodes outside of the function again. All right. So let's kind of add that real quick. So we're going to add another base 64. Didn't work. All right. So I could be wrong on this. So let's try UTF-8. And oh, lo and behold, let's pause. Look at all these functions. This appears to be the long string, which most people should be able to guess, is just an embedded function, or embedded payload that runs within the PHP. So basically, this PHP is just to mask this all these variables and calls, right? And this looks to be PHP, right? So we're just going to go ahead and copy this whole thing over. Let's see if I can just do this real quick. Or can I do this? Yeah, we're going to do copy raw output. And the moment I paste this, Windows is going to be really, really bad. There it is. Go ahead and ignore that, please. Nope, you're going to ignore it. Hello. All right. So yeah, Windows gets really mad at me with this stuff sometimes. All right, and the reason being is there's a lot of lines. There's 1,500 lines of code. We don't have to pay attention to all of it, mostly because myself and Kyle has kind of already went through all of this through pains and aches, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here, right? Like we can go down to like it's declaring like how to look for cookies. It's declaring like, hey, this is how you figure out certain things, right? So there's a lot going on. We're gonna skip all the way to the bottom here, or at least close to the bottom, right? And you'll notice here that there's a function called Action Network, and there's even more embedded code. Okay, this is interesting. All right, so I want to figure out what this is doing. More than likely, because if it's network related, it's probably calling like a reverse shell or a socket. So let's just figure out what it's doing. We're gonna go ahead and pause these two real quick. And it looks like it's calling a Perl function. So this is a Perl file, and it's definitely creating a socket to connect to, right? Now we could technically copy this into a Perl file and try to analyze it, try to figure out what's going on, but something that was additional that we noticed is that there's these three lines right here where it's my string declared, and it begins a encoding technique with this line here. Interesting, right? So first thing I'm going to do is just copy and paste that into Google search, and there is a UU encode. Okay, so let's click on that, kind of take a look in here. So there is a decoder. Doesn't seem like it needs a key or anything, so we're just going to go ahead and just copy this entire line, the entire line. So it's very important to pay attention to the lines. In fact, we might need this too, but we're just going to do the entire line for now. And do this, and decrypt, and there is our flag. And that is how you find, that is a very long part of the video on how to do PHP Stager. And as I stated before, Where Am I is ranked medium, but we solved that in like 2 minutes, right? PHP Stager took, what are we at right now? Almost 30 minutes to solve. So all's well that ends well, right? So, so that's PHP Stager. Let's go over, unless anybody has any questions. I see there's a couple more people on the stream now. Let's see here. I haven't done chicken wings. I haven't done compress. I think chicken wings is super easy. Dumpster fire we're going to need to use with SQLite, I think, because we have to analyze databases. Human 2 I'm still working on. Backdoor Splunk is going to be its own video. Same thing with Hot Off the Press is already its own video. It's video 2. Traffic will be its own video, and Xerion will be its own video. And then I'll add some more as we go along, because we still have to do dial tone, which I believe somebody's already done a write-up for. Oh, we do? Okay, so that's the one we will do. We won't do one we haven't done. But we'll go over one of the impossible challenges due to our requests. So we'll go over the first one. And I think, Kyle, you're on the stream. So they as in Huntress, or at least Pro Slasher, messed up, and the actual flag didn't work because the methodology didn't convert correctly. But I still got credit for it because he stated that I paid attention to all the outside intricacies, because apparently there's 2 ways to get that hash. And the way that I got it was just paying attention to OSINT. So, but the first methodology, and I'll bring this up here real quick. And we also solved lolz number 2. I didn't get first blood credit, but I figured it out. It was funny. I liked it. All right. So real quick, I'll bring this back up again. So there is a section called rejected challenges. I've been paying attention to these because these are challenges that the Huntress team thought that would be way too difficult and too frustrating for people to figure out. So there are threads, and I'm invited to these threads quite often, where they push these very hard, difficult ones on to see if we can figure it out. And we work as a collaborative team, as you can see with threats. So the first one was deleted because as you can see on here, failure on the challenge writer's ability to convert hex characters to ASCII. So how this works, and I'll bring this up here real quick, because the challenge is not, I don't think the challenge is on here anymore. It's not. Okay, give me 1 second while I bring it up. I'm not going to save that. We're not going to save that. Okay. That is lolz 2. All right. Okay. So the flag that we're giving, actually, let me bring this back here real quick. This is the format of the flag that we get, right? Right. This is the only hint that we got was this flag, right? And it's separated by commas, right? And you would immediately assume that they're IP addresses. So there was this rabbit hole where we were trying to figure out if these IP addresses represented something. So there's a big search to see like if the creator of the challenge, his name is ProSlasher, who works for Huntress, or this his Discord name is ProSlasher, thought that like maybe he owned them, which they don't. So we kept going down this rabbit hole trying to figure out what they mean. So the first thing that we figured out is that maybe we should convert it to binary, right? So if we convert it to binary, right, we get these and default zeros for the 2 x's here, right? And this was the first step, and we had to kind of figure out if this would represent something, right? So let me bring up this information. So somebody tried to convert this into Morse code, right? So we try to like test around with Morse code a little bit. So if we do this real quick, we could do this with actually this site. Let's do Morse code. Yes, there it is. Our encoder. Here we go. So we can encode this, right? And it gives us this information here. And I'm following the instructions that were provided to us here. If we take this and convert it back into here, and we use translate automatically, I think. So you see that on the middle side here, it converted it into these weird string characters, right? They're patternized for a reason, because we are supposed to kind of play around with conversions. There's like 2 conversions going on here, and the first one we thought was binary, but I don't think it's supposed to be that way. Let's see here. Just bear with me real quick. What had happened was, let me get this back here real quick. What has happened is that when it was converted, let's see here. Bear with me. Yeah, and I guess I can kind of reveal this information here. So he made a mistake on converting this information, right? So one of these IP addresses, let me bring it back up real quick. I think this one was supposed to be 69, and it wasn't. It was 39. Let's see here. And we can see that here. So they start, because Clovis Mint and Noah Tatum, I don't know if you guys can see the names on the stream or not, but they figured out that there was something missing, because it was spelling a hash that they were trying to submit, and it just wasn't converting correctly. So, let me bring this back over here real quick. Let's see here. What did he do? Okay, so it was converted to hex first. So they did this. Let's do this. And we're going to do comma. Bring this back over. Okay, so they did this first. They converted it to hex. Then they converted it to Morse code. Oops. I did convert it over. Okay, and they got this. Now, this is incorrect. It was supposed to be slightly off a little bit because they had 69 or 39 instead of 69. And then when you retranslate it back, it would generate the flag right here. But it didn't work correctly. So that was Impossible Challenge 1, is that it required us to, first off, figure out, what was it? What these X's meant, which were actually supposed to be 0.0. That's probably didn't work. Why? So they were supposed to be 0, 0. We convert it to hex, convert the hex to Morse code, convert it back over, and then it would generate a hash for us right here. And that's how you solve impossible task number 1. The other way to do it is that this is the way ProSlasher did it too, and I'm allowed to explain this now because it's now gone. It's solved, right? Is that ProSlasher did it backwards. What he did first is that he decided to use one of his first passwords he's ever set, which was Huntress 2. So if you look at like Huntress 2 here, let's see here. Now let's do MD5 hash. Huntress 2, that is the flag. So what he did is he did this first. He created MD5 hash from one of his old passwords, Huntress 2. And he grabbed this and went backwards through the Morse translator, and then backwards again from Morse to hex, and then backwards again from hex to binary, and then backwards again, and made IP addresses. And that's how he set the challenge in a way. So really interesting way of how he came up with the flag. But the reason why I was able to guess this is because I paid attention to a thread that he was on, a different type of thread, where we talked about OSINT collections and trying to figure out, like, because he provided 2 different ways to solve it. One was the methodology. The other way was determining him as a person. And he did talk about himself a lot. Like, he talked about how he works for Huntress, where he lives, password security, and he put in all of his first 4 passwords in this thread. And one of which I paid attention to was Huntress 2. So I brute forced all 4 passwords and got it. So and that's how I got it. Now, obviously, that doesn't really count. It's a brute force, but he still gave me credit for it. And then Noah Tatum figured it out through Morse code. So that's how you solve challenge 1. For the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and pause this recording for video 3, and we'll move on to other challenges. I'll probably record a couple of the medium ones on their own tomorrow and upload them, but for this stream, we're going to go ahead and close this recording, and I'll see you guys next time.